It's about time to harvest your potatoes, but are you noticing something going wrong with them? Are you noticing pests, yellowing, plants dying? In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've been experiencing with my potatoes, things that you can do for particular garden pests like the Colorado Potato Beetle, and just general things to look for in your potato plants. Hi, my name is Landon Gilthel. I'm a pepper and pine garden design, and today I'm going to show you what's been going on with my potato patch and how I'm remedying that and assessing what's going on and harvesting, actually. I can't believe it. It's the end of June, 1st of July, and we're harvesting potatoes here. I showed you all recently in my quick end of June garden tour that I was experiencing some weird things with my potato plants. Now, for the most part, the past 3 years, I've not really had any significant issues with my potato plants or my potato harvest. There's always like what I call a general yellowing of the leaves that happens towards the base of the plant. And I always just prune off those yellow leaves and put them in the compost pile, unless I notice it's a blight situation, which I really haven't experienced a lot of blight with my potatoes, and I'm really grateful for that. But this year I was noticing something different, and I think I've narrowed down what the problem was, but it took me a while to really kind of read through all the different possibilities, think what might be happening. And so I'm hoping that this video might be helpful for you as you're assessing your potato plants and any possible problems you might be having right now. The first thing I noticed was just a lot of yellowing leaves, more so than what I'm used to seeing. And they weren't just necessarily at the bottom of the plant. They were really happening all over the plant. These are plants that had not flowered yet. Now, once the plant has flowered, a couple weeks after that, you'll start to notice the plant dying, and that's normal. And 2 weeks after that, after you notice the plant starting to die, is when you harvest. But we weren't to the point yet with these potatoes, so I wasn't really sure what was happening. And it didn't look like blight. So this is what blight looks like with potato plants. And it's more of like a spotty, spots on the leaf. And that's not really what I was noticing. But then after a couple weeks, the whole plant would die. Now I've already pulled out a lot of these plants, but I'm going to show you some of them that I've left just for an example of what I've been seeing. So here's what I'm seeing as we zoom in here. This is what a generally healthy potato plant should look like. This is what I started noticing in my gardens. And these yellowing leaves are actually at the top of the plant, not at the bottom where I'm used to seeing them. And as I zoom in, you'll see that there's not really a lot of spotting on these like what you would see with blight, potato blight. And of course, then the leaves end up dying like this. Now, this could be a bit of blight here, but it's just not generally what I would notice as to be blight. I also noticed that eventually the plant would just rot out right here at the surface and die. Now I'm going to pull this potato plant. I pulled a lot last night and all the potatoes were fine, which I thought was interesting. This one, I assume, will be the same. Now here's the seed potato. Still pretty much intact, although there's some ants on there. And that could be a problem. I have noticed many ant colonies in these gardens. The ants could be causing, root disruption, which then kills the plant. These potatoes that I've been picking have been perfectly fine. So that's good. Even though I haven't got as big of a harvest as I wanted, I did pull up several potatoes last night for dinner. But what I think the problem is more of a root disruption. And let me explain what I mean by that. I had mentioned end of June garden tour that I wondered if maybe it was the wood chips that I had put in these gardens. Maybe they were contaminated and causing issues with the potato plants. But I'm not seeing those issues with my cabbages that are planted right next to them. So that can't be the issue. If my cabbage plants are perfectly healthy and my potatoes aren't, then it's not an issue with the soil or the wood chips. So as I was digging and doing more reading, something caught my attention, and that was voles, V-O-L-E-S, a cousin to moles, a cousin to mice. But unlike moles, voles will actually eat your tubers underground. And I had noticed earlier in the season that there was a lot of disruption over in this part of the garden where I was noticing more of the yellowing of the potato leaves. The ground was lifted. I noticed little tunnels. I had noticed it over here by my cabbages as well. So I think that the issue were the voles getting in there, They probably ate some of the potatoes because I pulled up a couple plants that didn't have any potatoes on them. I think they disrupted the roots and therefore killed the plant. Because as I move down the road this way, where I have not seen the voles and their tunnels, these plants are all, for the most part, fine. So I think that's my prognosis, is a problem with voles. However, when it starts heating up like this, you start getting the humidity of midsummer. That is when you will notice those blight problems, when you want to look for those spots all over your plants. You want to pull off those leaves as soon as possible, those branches, as soon as you notice it. And generally, you don't necessarily want to compost any leaves that have disease on them unless you're super sure that your compost pile is hot enough to kill off those bacteria. If it is, then you can put those diseased leaves in there because the heat of the pile will literally kill off the bacteria. But you definitely want to research what temperature your pile should be at for that to happen, and then get a compost thermometer to make sure that you're reaching that temperature. If not, burn those leaves in your burn pile or dispose of them however you're able to dispose of things like that. You don't want that stuff spread. You definitely don't want it to decompose in your garden bed because it'll be there for the next year. So any type of disease on your plant leaves, particularly you're going to notice that on your potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. Although I notice them more on my potatoes and tomatoes. Those are all in the Solanaceae family. So they are prone to that same blight disease. And honestly, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with your potatoes. There's soil-borne bacteria, there's nematodes, all kinds of things. If you were to look up potato diseases, you'd come up with a whole host of things that I'm not going to be able to cover in this video. But if you do start noticing interesting things going on with your potato plants and your leaves, just do a quick search, look at the images that they're providing and see if you can't place what you were seeing with what you're reading about. But it is going to require you to do a little bit of research. I could talk about it here, but I don't have the pictures really to show you because I'm not experiencing that in my garden. However, if I do, be sure that I'll make a video about it. The other thing that I've been experiencing with my potato plants that I have not experienced before are Colorado potato beetles. Now, for the most part, I think I've gotten rid of them. I took off the adult beetles and fed them to my chickens. They loved them. They're pretty easy to spot because they're kind of like a pinkish red against those green leaves. So if you notice that, pull them off, dispose of them, squish them. I mean, you can spray them. I think it's Monterey insect spray. It's something you can use on the adult beetles. The pupae and the larvae are a lot easier to get rid of. You can do a mixture of 3 cups vinegar to 1 cup water to 1 teaspoon of soap. And that will help get rid of those younger stages of the Colorado beetle, but it won't handle the adult. So you'll have to find a different solution for the adults. But honestly, just picking them off, feeding them to your chickens, or just getting rid of them is the easiest thing that I have found for those adults. And what I actually do is I'll either pick off the individual beetle or I pick off the leaf that they're on. I found a whole bunch of them on one leaf, and so I just kind of picked off that leaf. So it's really kind of your tolerance level with pests, if you want to be touching them or picking them off, or if you just want to spray them and get rid of them. I try to avoid harsh chemicals on my plants, just because I don't want to take the chance of that being absorbed into my or my children's bodies. Sometimes I have to go a little bit stronger depending on the situation. I know that neem oil can also be used on those younger stages of the Colorado potato beetle, but don't necessarily get rid of the adult stages. That's the problem, right? Because they're the ones laying the eggs. As for my yellowing potato plants, that's my 2-year-old in the background there, I ended up just pulling all of these out last night. I pulled all these potatoes out. They were just not looking very healthy. Here they are over here. The chickens are enjoying some of the fruits of those. And I'm just going to let this ground rest till I'm ready to plant some things for the fall. But all the potatoes were perfect. So that was exciting to see. You can have problems happen with your actual potatoes, which I didn't experience. And now I have this beautiful, rich soil here that's been cultivated even just this season and will be ready for my next crop. And I will just continue down the row here as I notice these guys starting to die off. I already pulled this one out. Probably have to pull that one out. A couple more I may need to come in here and pull out just to make sure I don't lose the potatoes under here. All of these are probably going to have to come out. They're just looking kind of sad. This looks a little bit more like blight right here. See the brown dots on the leaves? That is a little bit more like blight. And right here is a Colorado potato beetle. Right there. That's what they look like. This is the adult stage. So I'm just gonna go feed these to my chickens. Come here. Crime, come here. Come here. Here you go. Come get it. There we go. Now this is a completely separate potato row from that one. And I'm glad I did that because these are not experiencing the same issues that those are. So if I'm nothing else, I know that I have this potato row currently that is doing really well. Most of these plants have already flowered. So the flowers happened about a week or so ago. So I've got maybe another week till these leaves will start to die. Got a little bee here. Always good to see. And I am noticing the lower leaves yellowing like I was talking about over there. So I will just come in here and pull out these lower leaves that are starting to yellow. Because these leaves like this are the ones that will succumb to disease a lot easier. So that's just going to be me coming in here and spending about 10 or 15 minutes pruning out all these yellow leaves and putting them in my compost pile. But other than this kind of weird looking stuff going on right here, which I'm not sure what this is, there's only a couple plants right here that have this going on. It almost looks like a burn on the leaves. And so I'm still kind of doing research to figure out what this might be. But the weird thing is these look fine and those don't. These are also the ones that flowered. So they might just be dying off. This just looks different than what I'm used to seeing. This is also a variety I haven't grown. So lots of possibilities here. I just kind of have to keep an eye on these plants and see what happens. But see, here's an entire plant that just needs to, well, it's this plant right here. That's not looking very good. So I might need to come in here and just pull out this whole plant just to make sure that if it has any particular issues, it's not passing them on. Look at that. Those are the purple Viking potatoes. Those are beautiful. Look how pretty those are. That may be it. They just may be ready to be harvested. Oh man, I'm excited to try these. They're supposed to be better than a Yukon Gold. I have not grown these before. Another thing I thought would be really interesting to point out in this video is the differences between how I planted my potatoes, what kind of potatoes I planted, and how they fared over the season. So if you go back and watch my potato planting videos at the end of March, very beginning of April, I planted my own seed potatoes that had survived through the winter in my basement. And those potatoes I did not chit. I also planted potatoes that I got, seed potatoes that I got from the store, and I chitted those. So I was just kind of curious to see how different of a harvest I would get from potatoes that were chitted and potatoes that weren't. Of course, if I'm really going to do an experiment right, I probably need to have more controls than I have this year because I did not chit my seed potatoes and I chitted the store-bought seed potatoes. And what I really should have done is done half and half with both groups. So I kind of knew, you know, within that particular variety, how it does when it's chitted and not. So not a perfect experiment, but I'm okay with that. You know, it was just something I kind of decided to do last minute. What I will say is that the store-bought seed potatoes are a lot bigger than the ones that were in my basement. I had some really nice seed potatoes. They looked perfect, really, but they're not bad. They're just not as big as the ones that I bought from the store. But both varieties look really healthy. They haven't been affected by the yellowing at all. And again, I think that's because they're kind of, the ones down on this end of the bed have done better. Now, as I moved down the row where I started noticing all the yellowing plants, my seed potatoes did worse. They handled whatever disruption was happening, whether it was voles or blight, they handled that worse. The store-bought ones actually did really well. The other thing I noticed, if you watched that video, I'm impatient, so I'm planting potatoes, is I planted some potatoes that had long sprouts on them, longer than, I mean, you'll probably ever get from a seed potato bought at the store. But I just wanted to experiment and see if anything would come from those. And they did not do well. So I didn't plant any whose sprouts were longer than 10 inches. So they were somewhere between 5, 6 inches and 10 inches. And I think only one, maybe two of those seed potatoes made any sort of plant, and they're on the smaller side. But I will say they are still healthy. They haven't succumbed to the yellowing that the other plants did, and they still look pretty well. But most of them did not survive, so I will not be doing that in the future. So in conclusion, to wrap all this up, the best thing to do if you're struggling with sick looking potato plants is to, number one, recognize if they've flowered, and if they have flowered, how many weeks or days after the flowering is it? Because it might just be time to harvest. On that note, this is where having really good garden notes comes in handy. If you know how many days past when you put them in the ground you're currently at. So with these potatoes, I'm right at 90 days. So these are pretty much ready to harvest. I planted them the very end of March, the 1st of April. So we're at 90 days. They could go to 100 days if I wanted them to. And what I think I'm going to do is the healthier ones that still look nice and green, I'm going to continue to let those grow. The ones that are starting to yellow and look sickly, I'm going to pull those up. And what that's going to allow is for some spaces to open up that I can start succession planting some more of the things I'm going to be starting indoors, like beets and greens, more cabbage or cauliflower if I want. I haven't laid my hammer down what I'm going to do, but I have purchased my seeds and I'm getting ready to start those fall plants inside. So this is where they will go. So I'm starting to clear out some of those plants that are dying and looking sickly. And then just pay attention to if you notice any changes in your plant, if they are starting to yellow, if you do start noticing pests. I mean, this is why it's good to have your eyes on your garden, on your plants every day, if nothing more than 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes out of the garden, you can pull a few weeds, you can harvest a few things, and you can have your eyes on your plants to see if something is changing, because this all happened in less than a week. I was gone for 4 days and came back to dead looking plants and the potato beetles. So it happens fast. And if you're not paying attention, you'll end up losing an entire crop. Thankfully, I did not lose an entire crop. I did not have the kind of harvest I would have from the number of plants that I pulled, but I have a decent harvest. And I still have a whole entire potato patch back over there, and I've got potatoes growing over there. So even if I don't get the full amount that I had planted, I still have a lot to harvest. There's still a lot to be done out here. So keep an eye on your plant. Look at those yellowing leaves. You can always pull up pictures on the internet. You know, go to reliable sources like your extension network. I always go to MSU Extension, Michigan State University. They always have really clear information. Or places like Gardening Know-How will give you those basic information, the basic images that you're wanting to look for to see what your plants might be dealing with, if they are. And then of course, like I experienced, you never know if there is an animal going for your tubers underneath the ground. So there's all kinds of possibilities could happen, which can make it really frustrating as a gardener to narrow down what the issue is. But you got to do some reading. You've got to keep your eyes on your plants, and and then just talking to other gardeners in your area and what they may be experiencing can really kind of help you narrow down and deduce what's going on with your plants. So I hope this has been helpful. Whether you're experiencing some sickness or some issues with your plants now, or for the future, you have this knowledge packed away in the back of your brain. And my name is Landon Gilfillan here at Pepper and Pine Garden Design, growing gardeners and their gardens. And I'll see you in the next video.